Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Mike and we're here with another history reaction. Today we're looking at OverSimplified's Three Kingdoms videos. Now, in terms of history, this falls way out of my kind of comfort zone from where I know. For those of you who have watched the channel before, my interest and my kind of experience of history falls firmly within European history, namely 18th century onwards, kind of a modern period really. However, I do have a love and fascination with medieval and classical history, of which I haven't been academically taught that, but over the years since I was a small child, basically, I've learnt and became indulged in, the medieval, classical, ancient Rome, individuals, wars, events. So I'm fairly covered when it comes to Europe. Asia, however, other than Japan, in a select few periods, so Sengoku Jidai and like stuff like the Boshin War, anything pre-modern, I don't really know. So Chinese history, I only really know 20th century onwards, the same as India. So that's kind of on me, that's my fault, but just putting that out there. What I do know, however, is I have played this game what apparently is sponsored. I'm a big fan of the Total War franchise. Series. I've ever since I was younger, I played Rome 1, Medieval 2 and stuff like that, and I have played Three Kingdoms. It wasn't my favourite, but it was fun. I think I'd done a campaign with a guy who made loads of coalitions. I think it's like Yun Xiao or Yuan Xiao, something like that. He started way up in the north of the map, for those of you who have played this game. So that's kind of as far as my knowledge goes, and I did play the romance mode. So that's not, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's not a dating simulator of a strategy game. This is a kind of a mythical type portrayal of history rather than the grounded realism. So with that disclaimer out of the way, this is probably going to be me learning just as much as you guys if you're unfamiliar. So I'm really excited. As always, link will be in the description. Please check them out. They make cracking videos, the OverSimplified guys, and let's get into it, shall we?
This video was made possible by Total War Three Kingdoms, the brand new strategy game from the multi-award winning Total War series. Support my channel by using the link in the description down below to buy the game on Steam. Also, new merch available now in the store, including a mystery new character pin. I wonder who it could be.
George Washington.
Ancient China. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, the children are playing in the village square. What a wonderful time to be alive! Hey, the Yellow River flooded again and destroyed all your crops. And also we're being raided by nomadic tribesmen. And also this period of Chinese history may be entirely mythical, meaning you may not even exist. Well, that would certainly explain the laser eyes. Chinese civilization...
Okay, so just quickly, because OverSimplified does this quite a bit, and I like it, is, what a time to be alive. And I do feel there is somewhat of this romanticization of, oh, I wish I was alive back in the medieval times and Roman times, or at this period and this period. And it's just like, while it would be great, like if you gave me the option, could I go back in time, explore these places, be invulnerable, then I'd be all about it. However, to go back and swap lives from where you are now in the 21st century to those lives back then, yeah, as said, a lot can go wrong. Not just the Yellow River flooding and stuff like that, but constant wars, illnesses, diseases and stuff like that. And so I think it's important to remember that history is cool. History is really good. Obviously I wouldn't be doing what I've done if I don't like history. However, I think it is just a reminder, sometimes it is nice to take a step back, reflect and, be thankful or grateful that, we don't really have to worry about the Yellow River flooding unless you live next to it and killing millions of people or causing widespread famine, or you waking up and having some terrible disease, hopefully, when this pandemic is over. So, on the whole, a lot of things to be thankful for living right in modern day, and the average person living back in the day probably would prefer to live right now rather than back then. But yeah, just a little reminder that, maybe we should be a bit more reflective and grateful for what we have now, rather than trying to romanticize what might not possibly be great.
Civilization began around the year 2000 BC, when the possibly mythical Xia dynasty was formed. Throughout China's history, dynasties would usually rise up with a powerful leader who worked for the good of the people. But over time, the leaders would become more corrupt and self-serving. someone would inevitably build a lake of alcohol, and the angry populace would overthrow them, giving way for a new dynasty to rise. Following this pattern, the Xia dynasty was replaced by the Shang, who liked bronze and writing, but then the leaders got corrupt, and were replaced by the Zhou, who liked iron and philosophy. But that one sort of just fell apart, and was replaced by the Qin, who liked building walls and people made out of rock. But they were pretty tyrannical from the start, and were quickly replaced by the Han, who liked creating new trade routes and getting in touch with their emotions. In line with this pattern, the Han dynasty came about under the strong and popular leadership of Emperor Gaozu. The dynasty remained firmly in place for over 4 centuries and was considered a golden age in Chinese history, developing new forms of art, political thinking, technology. Oh, looks like all the leaders got corrupt. See, probably the biggest problem in ancient China's political system that allowed so much corruption to come about all the time was a little something called court culture. Let me explain. Imagine for me, if you will, that you are the son of the Chinese emperor. Hooray! Now, apart from how weird it is that you have a ton of stepmoms and many of them would like to kill you, and also all of your friends are middle-aged dudes with no dongs, life's pretty alright. One day, your father says, "Son, I know our relationship hasn't been the best, and I've never said this before, but I just want to let you know that I love you." Oh no, I'm having a heart attack! Look at you. Now you're the emperor. I'm so proud of you. But wait, you are but a child and have no idea how to rule over a massive empire. Fret not, because just about everyone in your court wants to help you out with that. Hey man, remember me? I'm your mom's bro. Anyway, I heard you needed someone to rule over China for you. I mean, to help you rule China. So hey, here's a popsicle. I hope we can get along. No way, man. We've been your friends and your personal caretakers your whole life. And even though we may have no dongs, I think you should give us all the power to rule China. I mean, help you rule China. So who will you be influenced by? Your scheming uncle or your loyal eunuchs? And towards the end of the Han dynasty, a string of child emperors allowed more and more power to fall into the hands of the eunuchs. Oh no, now they're scheming too! They began handing out government jobs for bribes, heavily taxing the poor for their own wealth. And while you're sitting there eating your popsicle, everyone in your court is literally murdering each other to try and consolidate more power and riches for themselves. While all the peasants are outside like, "Hey, did you guys know there's been a drought out here for 2 years?" Guys? Obviously the people weren't too happy that while they were struggling to survive, they were also being heavily taxed so that the eunuch faction could all have rockin' mansions, complete with swimming pools and Alexas.
Okay, play Despacito. But yeah, so that leads to the old adage that most people know, and that is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, whether you believe in that or not is another thing entirely. However, as this shows, power in individuals without a clear aim necessarily can lead to tyranny or corruption. Now, as it said at the beginning, is these dynasties started off great with the emperors or these leaders promising great things to the people, and they start off like that, and then perhaps, as I said, I'm only speculating, but perhaps once they lose sight of that initial goal, then that's when, aimless power becomes tyranny. Now, however, when you have the issue of a child ruler, it is an issue, because generally speaking, the absolute ideal situation is you have a ruler who then has children, and those children then are groomed for ruling as they grow up. I know that's certainly the case in medieval European society and onwards, is the monarchs would rule while those who were the children of them, their heir and throne, would be groomed and prepared for their own rule once their time to succeed comes. And that's why you have issues like, for example, when families have multiple children, you have one that's set up to be a ruler, in the future, another one is set for a career in the church, and then the kind of third, fourth, and onward sons are kind of left to their own devices. Suddenly, when something terrible happens, like the heir and the second son is killed, for example, then suddenly you have children, or men, as they might have grown up to be, who have no real idea of how to rule a kingdom. And when that happens, it makes them incredibly reliant on those that are around them. And as I said here, you have family members who would be scheming to try and, "Oh, look, I'll be your friend, I'll help you do this, I'll help you do that, and in return, I get some of the power in your authority." And it'll be the exact same for those who are in the court. In this case, it's the eunuchs. In kind of more European, that might be like courtiers or nobility or something like that, people who attend the court to try and get their voices in the king's ear, so to speak. And if that king or that ruler is a child particularly, obviously they're a lot more gullible, they're a lot more naive. And, that only leads to bad things, because again, once they then get that power, you give somebody a taste of power, it becomes very hard to get them to relinquish that, even when that child grows older. And it appears to be the way that it's going here. The eunuchs supposedly are heavily taxing the peasantry, as usual when it comes to corruption anyway. The poorest in society are usually the ones that suffer the most. And here it's the peasantry who have a drought, famine, and they're being heavily taxed. And I assume it would only be a matter of time before there's some populist uprising or another dynasty comes in. However, we'll just have to see. I'm only speculating.
So finally, when a self-proclaimed Taoist wizard came along and was like, you know whose fault it is that we're all out here starving? It's the emperor and his posse. They've lost their mandate from heaven, and the imperial family must be destroyed with an unrelenting, furious wrath. Well, so check this out. Huh? Can you tell what it is yet? Ta-da! It's a little kitty cat. Look at her little ears. The people loved his political philosophy. He promised them land reforms, and his followers grew in number. They began arming themselves and wearing yellow turbans. And they also developed a really catchy slogan. In the year 184, the Yellow Turban Rebellion broke out across China, with millions rising up against the Han Dynasty, and the imperial government in the capital city freaked out. With all their internal bickering, they were completely unprepared and unable to deal with such a huge rebellion. So they were forced to call on independent warlords from across the empire to help them deal with this situation. Some big names took part in the fighting. I'm talking the likes of the great Cao Cao, the tyrannical Dong Zhou, Liu Bei, Sun Jian, and many other Chinese names I am definitely not pronouncing correctly. These warlords crushed the rebellion in their own respective regions, and with casualties in the millions, the Han Dynasty breathed a huge sigh of relief. But what they didn't realize is that by relying on all the warlords and their armies, they had essentially diminished their own central control over the empire. And many of the warlords now held the power to act almost completely independently and rule over their own local regions themselves. Back in the capital, the emperor and his son were having a little chat. Listen, I know we've had our ups and downs, and I spend all of my time with your many smoking hot stepmoms instead of you. But what say you and I finally go on a little fishing trip together this weekend? Oh no, I'm having a stroke! And yet another child emperor was on the throne.
Okay, so I'll just let this advert play. So that would be something like if you've watched the Henry VIII video that I put up. That is something that that situation where you have lots of kind of nobility, or in this case warlords, kind of having their own free reign. That is what was kind of coined the term like bastard feudalism. This idea that essentially, bastard feudalism in the sense that the owners of that land or that region could basically do whatever they wanted. And obviously, hence the name that it got, that wasn't necessarily how things should be. And it's a similar way here. It's a big problem when a supposedly strong government suddenly needs to rely on other people for support. So, in this case, the Yellow Turban Rebellion happened. Millions across the country, as it said, rose up in revolt. Now, the problem was, I don't know for whatever reason, the government weren't capable of doing it. I assume that there wasn't an official kind of standing army necessarily that was centralized. And so, when that happens and the government can't respond to it or isn't quick to respond to it and needs to rely on outside support to do so, then suddenly you create a very problematic power dynamic. Because as it said, and as it's shown here, is when the government needed to basically rely on these warlords to suppress the rebellion for them, suddenly these warlords, after the fighting is done, are going to view their regions, their land, as kind of their own feudal property, because, they've just seen that the government isn't capable of putting down a rebellion. What are they going to do if a regional warlord suddenly just goes, well, no, I'm not going to listen to the emperor, I'm not going to do this, this is my land, I'm going to do with it what I please. And so it creates a very problematic power dynamic, as I previously said, because the government has shown itself, or the dynasty or the emperor has shown itself to be critically weak when it's supposed to be strong. And when anything in history has shown, weakness is always capitalized by somebody. It's to draw a parallel, it's a bit like in Scotland. You know, when people think of William Wallace and things like that, is the Scottish king died, and there was bickering between the Scottish clans and such like, and eventually Edward the First, the King of England, was asked to mediate for Scotland, and essentially this just gave Edward the First an opportunity, and he used it to his full advantage, and it kind of led to a quasi kind of occupation of Scotland, and that's where we have, you know, the William Wallace and Robert the Bruce and all that type of things going on. And it's the same thing here. When what is supposed to be a strong unifying government or dynasty or emperor or kingdom or whatever shows itself to be internally weak and it's not capable of providing with itself, then it can collapse on itself, not just from outside. Yeah, it can collapse not only from outside forces but from internally, which is the case here, where you have these regional warlords who suddenly found themselves with a huge amount of freedom, and also what's probably more dangerous is an entirely new sense and renewed sense that they can do whatever they please in their land because there is no strong central government to rectify that or stop them. Helps if I unmute the video. There we go.
Instead of the eunuch faction gaining even more power, this child emperor's uncle became his regent, who also just so happened to be the head of the imperial army, He Jin. Man, I hate those sneaky, lying, cheating eunuchs. Hey warlord Yuan Shao, what should we do? Kill them all. Right on. You can't kill the eunuchs. They're a vital part of this empire's governance. And also they paid me a lot of money to say that about them. Ah, come on! No! So He Jin and Yuan Shao decided the empress may need more convincing. And so they called in an infamous, feared, tyrannical, overweight warlord from the northwest to help convince her. That man was Dong Zhou, and he set out for the capital city with his army. Hey guys, I heard a rumor that He Jin was planning on killing us. Then why don't we kill him first? And so it was. They lured him to the palace with a forged letter from his sister, and when he got there, they lobbed off his head. Kill them all. Imperial forces stormed the palace, and the eunuchs were all massacred. The peasants, who were still suffering from drought and starvation, saw what was going on and began to riot. The emperor and his brother were forced to flee the city, which was now in flames, and the feared, nasty, tyrannical, bloated Dong Zhou had just arrived. He found the emperor and his brother wandering the hills outside of the city and was understandably confused. So he scooped up the emperor, went to the capital and was like, "Hey guys, what's up? I see the capital is on fire. Also, I'm here with my army and I have the emperor with me." Wait a minute, the capital is on fire, I'm here with my army, and I have the emperor. Screw you guys, I'm in charge. So now Dong Zhou ruled over the Han Dynasty as the emperor's regent. His first act was to say to the emperor, "Hey man, no hard feelings, but I like your little brother better, so I'm actually making him emperor instead of you, so you're free to go do whatever you want." Actually.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. That feels better. Dong Zhou ruled with an iron fist, and he did whatever the flip he wanted. He made absolute decisions himself, showing no regard for the monarchy. He had his opponents or those who disagreed with him killed. He broke protocol, doing things like keeping his sword when approaching the emperor, wearing shoes in the court, sleeping in the emperor's bed, and worst of all, he would walk in the presence of the emperor. You were meant to trot. The other warlords around the empire hated him, and so they said, "Something needs to be done about this guy. What say we form a coalition and oust him?" And it was agreed. Warlords from across China, their armies amounting to 100,000 men, allied together against the tyranny of Dong Zhou. Yuan Shao's coalition consisted of some of the nation's most capable leaders, including his half-brother Yuan Shu, the great Cao Cao, and Sun Jian. But Dong Zhou had an ace up his sleeve. His protege and adopted son, one of the most skilled and feared warriors in all of China. It's Lu Bu.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause it here because, as I said at the beginning of the video, I did are familiar with the game of Total War 3 Kingdoms. I just remember this guy, because this guy wasn't very nice. And in-game, he seemed incredibly overpowered, in that his general unit could like wipe armies himself. So I'm assuming he's either a magnificent fighter, or as it just said there, an ace up the card. So I assume he must be either an insanely good strategist, or a general, or a duelist, or something like that, which I'm hoping to see, because he was just insane in 3 Kingdoms, and I assume well, insane among insane characters, which tells you something entirely different. So I'm looking forward to see the role that he's playing.
This guy was a beast of a man. He never lost a duel, and no other warlord dared challenge him to one. He was also famous for betraying just about every warlord he ever fought for, something that Dong Zhou didn't seem too concerned about. The coalition attacked Dong Zhou in Luoyang, and in particular, Sun Jian's forces inflicted a heavy defeat against him, and he was forced to flee to the city of Chang'an. After this initial success, however, the war entered into a stalemate. The warlords in the coalition realized it was going nowhere, and also they all secretly hated each other, so they all went home. Dong Zhou was safe. Until legend has it that a government official in Chang'an had a daughter who was hot, super hot. He invited Lu Bu to his home and promised Lu Bu that someday he could marry his daughter. Then he invited Dong Zhou to his house and did the exact same thing. Dong Zhou was so smitten that he insisted on taking her as his concubine immediately. And when Lu Bu heard the news, he was pretty unhappy. Hey man, aren't you worried that you stole Lu Bu's girl and betrayal is like his personal hobby? Lu Bu? Betray me? No way, man. Never gonna happen. Oh, crap. Lu Bu, along with other government officials, assassinated the tyrannical Dong Zhou. Then they left his body burning in the streets. Some sources say he was so fat and oily, he kept on burning for days.
Okay. There's an advert coming up here, so that's why I muted it. So fat and oily that he burned for days. That is... I don't know if that's terrible or somewhat impressive, to be honest. So yeah, so Lu Bu is a duelist. That's what I learned now. He's apparently insane at fighting, and he's just murdered the lad. So I don't really know. Does Lu Bu? I'm assuming Lu Bu takes over in his stead.
Nice. So with Dong Zhou dead and the power of the Han government essentially decimated, China was left with a huge power gap, and a ton of warlords who all slept soundly at night dreaming of being the one to fill it. Here we enter into a crazy and chaotic period of civil war all across China, with so many people, so much betrayal, so much intricacy, it makes Game of Thrones look like a Dr. Seuss publication. But just to give you an idea of how crazy and chaotic it was, see if you're able to keep up with this. Are you ready? Here we go. Here's a rough map of the warlords throughout the Han Dynasty at the time.
Okay, so... just trying to look at any names that I recognize. So, as I said, I recognize Yang Xiao because that was the person that I played with, and I know some of them. I know some of the big players. I know like Cao Cao or Cao Cao, however it's pronounced. I know that he's a renowned strategist in history. That is the one thing that I do know, but otherwise, none entirely that I recognize. I don't know. When it says up here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, in the black, the tribes, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that because I'd end up offending somebody. Yeah, I'm just wondering if they were like a united coalition of tribes or whether they were kind of just like loosely individual tribes and they've just been given that name. The same as the hill tribes in the southeast. But the thing that I'm looking at as well, I mean, again, I'm only drawing on their kind of Asian history that I know, is it looks very similar to kind of being like Sengoku Jidodai in Japan, when kind of the central government again was weak and you had various different clans and families all trying to vie for their own power, which I assume is going to happen here. It's called the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or the game itself was, and I know the whole period of history is called the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and so I'm assuming that it comes down to three major players. Which is worrying that I only recognise two of the names there. So let's see what goes on.
Half-brothers Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu were both in a power struggle for who would become the figurehead of their family. Yuan Shu made alliances with warlords in the north, along with Sun Jian, the guy who defeated Dong Zhou. Yuan Shao also made alliances with Liu Biao in the south and Cao Cao, who was an amazing strategist and general. All of these warlords began fighting each other. Cao Cao began building his own strength by subjugating nearby remnants of the Yellow Turban Rebellion into his own forces. Down south, things weren't going so well for Sun Jian, as he was killed in an ambush, so Sun 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 Ce took over. Then, Yuan Shu got pushed back to the river Huai, so he ordered Sun Ce to take the territory of warlord Lu Kang. Then Sun Ce went off to capture territories in the east for himself. Cao Cao's family lived in this province over here. One day, they were murdered. Oh no, Cao Cao held the province's governor responsible, and so he launched a cruel invasion in which he pillaged cities and murdered over 100,000 civilians. The governor sent out a call for help, and a very popular, likable warlord by the name of Liu Bu came to his aid. However, while Cao Cao was away fighting, a rebellion was staged against him in his home province by none other than it's Lu Bu. Cao Cao rushed home and defeated Lu Bu, who fled to the east, which by now had been inherited by Liu Bu. Then Lu Bu, surprise surprise, launched a rebellion against Liu Bu, who fled to Cao Cao. Together, Cao Cao and Liu Bu would go on to invade and defeat Lu Bu. Lu Bu offered to join Cao Cao, and Cao Cao considered the offer, but his advisors were like, no way man, this guy's betrayed literally everyone he ever worked for. And so boo-hoo, Lu Bu was executed.
Okay, so Lu Bu's dead. There's a lot of change in sides here. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep it on. So Liu Bu was fighting Cao Cao or Cao Cao, and then Lu Bu done a rebellion in Cao Cao's lands, and then when Cao Cao retired to deal with that, Lu Bu then fled to Liu Bu, and while they were fighting each other again, Lu Bu staged another rebellion in Liu Bu's land, and then Liu Bu and Cao Cao, who had previously been fighting each other, then allied together to fight that, and then okay, Lu Bu's dead. That's I'm assuming, given the emphasis on Cao Cao, though, he's going to be one of the major players.
Next, Cao Cao convinced the emperor to move in with him. Now he's in control of the Han government, something that made his allies very jealous. Yuan Shu, out of nowhere, decides to declare himself emperor of the new Zhong dynasty. Nobody liked that. His allies cut ties with him. The imperial government ordered everyone to kill him. He tried to flee to his brother Yuan Shao, but died of illness on the way. Sun Ce took over his territory, and then got assassinated. So his brother, Sun Chen, took over. Liu Bu turned on Cao Cao, but got obliterated, and was forced to flee south. Yuan Shao finally defeated the warlord to his north, and could now focus south. He declared war on his ally Cao Cao, but was defeated at the Battle of Guandu. Cao Cao has now united the north, and he turned his attention to the south. In particular, Liu Biao's province was becoming a powerful threat, so Cao Cao attacked him. Liu Bu was now fighting for Liu Biao, and he held Cao Cao off for a while. But then Liu Biao died and his son took over, and immediately surrendered to Cao Cao. Liu Bu was horrified, and he fled southward to try and maintain control of the province. Cao Cao was on an absolute roll, and it looked like he would be the one to take control of China. He began making plans to attack both Liu Bu and Sun Qian, and the two of them, seeing where things were headed, met up and decided to form an alliance. Now I know that was a lot to take in, but all you really need to know at this point is that this guy is on his way to taking over everything, and he's about to throw his full weight at the southern warlords. These two have one chance, one battle, to prevent him from invading the south, and that battle was the famous Battle of Red Cliffs. To take the south, Cao Cao would need to control and cross the mighty Yangtze River. He had over 200,000 men to face against Liu Bu and Sun Qian's combined force of 50,000. How would they stand a chance when they were so outnumbered? Legend says most of Sun Qian's advisors pleaded with him to surrender, but then he smashed up a table and they all backed down. Luckily, Cao Cao's forces were ravaged by disease and exhaustion, and his northern soldiers weren't too comfortable on ships. So when Cao Cao sailed down the river and the two sides met for an initial skirmish at Wulin, Cao Cao was unable to inflict a defeat against the allies. Then one of Sun Qian's men came up with a very sneaky plan. He sent Cao Cao a letter pretending that he and others wanted to defect to his side, and offered to bring him some of Liu Bu and Sun Qian's finest ships. Little did Cao Cao know, however, that those ships were full of flammable reeds. As they approached his fleet, they were set alight and destroyed his ships in camp. Seeing the situation as hopeless, Cao Cao ordered a difficult retreat through the rain and marshlands, during which more of his men fell to illness and disease. The underdogs had won, and Cao Cao would never again have another chance to take the south. Following that, the three warlords took some time to finish off some smaller competitors in their own regions, and by the year 214, China looked a little bit like this. Cao Cao continued to try to penetrate the southern regions, but had no success, and even lost the Hanzhong region to Liu Bu in 217. The former allies eventually fell out over who should own this territory here, with Sun Qian coming out on top. In 220, Cao Cao died of a head disease, and was replaced by his son, Cao Pi. Cao Pi convinced the emperor of Han to abdicate, and then proclaimed himself the emperor of the new state of Wei. Liu Bu followed suit, declaring himself the true emperor of Shu Han, and a few years later, Sun Qian joined in the fun and declared himself emperor of Wu. And so now you have a number of kingdoms in China. How many? Count them. 1, 2, 3. 3 kingdoms. Except, actually, they weren't kingdoms, they were dynasties. And when the 3 kingdoms finally formed, not a whole lot happened. For the next 3 decades, they continued to engage in combat, but it almost always ended in stalemate, and nobody really got anywhere. So how did it all end? Did Cao Cao's descendants eventually realize his dream of unifying China? Not quite. Instead, the three kingdoms became victims of the usual problems that plagued Chinese dynasties. In Wu, Sun Qian's descendant became a tyrant who was more interested in spending time with his concubines than governing. In Shu Han, a powerful, corrupt eunuch faction rose up, and by now we all know how that ends. And in Wei, a string of young emperors gave way for a powerful family, the Sima clan, to take control of the dynasty's government. This Sima clan recognized the weak state Shu and Wu had been reduced to, and so they began making plans. I've just received this letter that says Wei is planning to attack us. Should we make preparations for war? Nah, it's probably nothing to worry about. Let's do absolutely nothing.
Dear.
Sounds good to me. Wei launched a full-scale invasion into Shu, which fell within a year. Then Sima Yan forced the Wei emperor to abdicate and proclaimed himself emperor of the new Jin dynasty. In the year 279, Jin launched an invasion of Wu and finally unified China in the year 280. The pattern of rising and falling dynasties, division and reunification would continue in China for centuries to come. Right now you may be asking yourself, but wait a minute, what would have happened if Cao Cao had his way and unified China? Or what if Lu Bu never assassinated Dong Zhou and he continued to rule over the Han dynasty? What about if one of these smaller warlords had risen to the top? Dang it, what if I want to be a warlord during the downfall of the Han dynasty? Whoa, partner, calm down, because now you can. This video was brought to you by Total War 3 Kingdoms, a brand new strategy game that combines a gripping turn-based campaign of empire building, statecraft, and conquest with stunning real-time battles. Choose from a cast of legendary warlords and conquer the realm. Unite China under your rule. Forge the next great dynasty and build a legacy that will last through the ages. Recruit heroic characters to aid your cause and dominate your enemies on military, technological, political, and economic fronts. Will you build powerful friendships, form brotherly alliances, and earn the respect of your many foes? Or would you rather commit acts of treachery, inflict heart-wrenching betrayals, and become a master of grand political intrigue? I bet you would. Your legend is yet to be written, but one thing is certain: glorious conquest awaits. Buy the game on Steam using my link in the description down below. It would also support my channel and my work massively, so thank you.
Okay, and so I think that's pretty much the end of the video there. So, not so much input from me on this time. Some of you will probably enjoy that a bit more. But yeah, so I've learned a huge amount there. I mean, apologies about losing track a little bit when the civil wars all kicked off with each other. Again, as I said at the beginning of the video, Asian history I know very little about. And even though I had actually played this game, again, you know, I treat it like I do regular Total War games in the sense of, oh, I know the basic mechanics and that's how I'm going to play. I don't necessarily pay attention to the geopolitical events before and after and during playing. But no, I said that was really interesting. As I said, I know very little about Asian history, and so if that's something that you want me to have a look at and try and explore a little bit deeper, then please, I'll be more than happy for you to recommend any videos in the channel, just in the comments below, and I'll be happy to look at them, because again, it is a period of, well, not just a period, it's a kind of area of history where I know very little about, whether that be Indian, Chinese, or Japanese, really, or wider Asian as a whole. I'd be eager to learn more about it if anyone does know any content creators or types of things that are out there. And yeah, I don't really, usually I conclude, but I don't really know what to say there, to be honest, because I don't really have much input to add. I enjoyed it. I enjoy learning what I have learnt, you know, and as I said, with the power struggles and stuff like that within each other, again, it's not too dissimilar to what I said previously with the War of the Roses or things like that. Powerful factions all vying for power. And again, you know, that kind of descent, I suppose, from, you know, what happened to the other two southern kingdoms, where they repeated the same mistakes that happened previously. You know, one spent far too much time with concubines and became apathetic and, you know, withdrawn, and the other one again allowed the eunuchs to run things themselves, which again, as I said, once you hand over that power and authority to people, there's no saying that they're actually going to be doing a good job for that, good job for you. You know, that's the whole point of having supposedly a strong government, is you have your advisors to advise, but not to actually act. You know, and so again, kind of a reflection, you know, and that would be mirrored everywhere, not just in China, but in, you know, the European theatres and stuff like that. Weak rule leads to chaos, and chaos isn't exactly great for stability and peace, generally speaking. But that's the video. As always, please check out the original creators in the link below, where I will link the video. And if there have any other recommendations, any areas or history that you would like me to have a look at, any particular genre, maybe you would like me to, maybe, I don't know, branch into looking at even stuff like historical games, just let me know, because I'm just spitballing. I want to make this channel the very best that it can be, and the only way that I'm going to do that is by constructive criticism and seeing what you guys would like me to watch. I'm trying to grow this channel and trying to make it the very best that it possibly can be, and I'm only going to do that by your guys' help. And so without further ado, thank you ever so much for watching, stay safe, and all of you please have a nice day. Thank you, bye bye.